Speaker view, pin. All right, the tech details are now complete. Yep, all right. All right, so welcome everyone. We're in week 2 of this kind of series of explorations. Well, Suvijana is away and gladly having Damavara join us this week. Thank you. Please jump in if there's anything. We're going to talk about quarrels today, disputes. So yeah, I had said we were probably going to cover views and opinions this week, but my opinion was that I was more ready for quarrels. So we're gonna attend to some quarrels and disputes and go to views probably next week. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sangham Namasami. Every time I say that, I feel like, oh, we are so lucky. We're so lucky to have the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha to help us with the inevitable difficulties that we do encounter in ourselves and in our families, in our friendships, in our workplaces, in our world. So we're just going to go dive deep today, right on into quarrels and disputes. I'm going to do a screen share. Oops. Let's see. I think you're seeing some birds fighting and quarrels and disputes. Okay, great. Thanks for the confirmation. So we're going to look at 3 suttas hopefully today. The Honeyball Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, very, very, very famous sutta. Flowers Sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya. And Is This What You Think of Me from the Majjhima Nikaya, number 103. And there'll be, none of them are in their totality, especially the first one. We're only going to do the Buddhist part. And then we'll do most of Is This What You Think of Me, as far as that's a sutta about disputes. So let's go to the suttas. And those who are interested on Thursday morning will play a little bit more with the embodiment of these ideas that come up today. And Thursday night we'll have a reflection and meditation that are around something that supports attending to this theme. And that's in Pacific time when I say morning and evening. We have to convert for other time zones. So the first sutta we're going to look at is the Honeyball Sutta. Who's heard of the Honeyball or Honey Cake Sutta? Yeah, okay. So we will either hear it for the first time or we will deepen. And the summary of the sutta is that there's a brahmin, and we'll get to know the relationship with the Buddha a little bit more, who comes to the Buddha and kind of wants to pick a fight. And the Buddha kind of gives an uncharacteristically enigmatic reply. Enigmatic meaning kind of like not easy to parse out and fathom. A lot of the Buddha's instructions, although difficult to follow, are fairly like the words themselves kind of are easy to pick up, and then you go, but how do I practice that? But usually it's pretty easy to like get the gist of what he's saying. In this case, it's a little convoluted. So here we'll go into the text. Dandapani, the Sakyan, while going for a walk, plunged deep into the great wood. He approached the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he stood to one side, leaning on his staff, and said to the Buddha, "What is the ascetic's doctrine? What does he assert?" So this is someone who's gone, the Buddha's gone off into the woods to meditate for the day. And you don't see a whole lot of the, he paid respects to the Buddha, stood politely to one side on all of this. It's a little bit more direct. This is an extract. It does say there was some polite conversation to begin with, so it wasn't completely outside of the social norms of exchange. But why might this individual be approaching the Buddha? I saw a talk by Venerable Sujato, who said, I don't know, if I were walking in the woods and I saw the Buddha sitting at the root of the tree, I'd go, oh, and I'd tiptoe away. And hope to catch him at another time to ask a question. And that's not what this person does. So the comments here, when I'm showing a comment and then there's an asterisk, and I'll verbalize it for those who can't see the screen. I'm taking the comment mostly from Venerable Sujato, but I've edited it a little bit for this content, or added a little bit more detail to it. But you'll find the original comments directly on Sutta Central. So the comment here is that this approach to the Buddha is a little bit rude, at that time. And I think we would think that too, if you walk up to somebody and you just kind of hang out on your, walking stick, not because you're aged or need the stick for your support, but just because it's your prop. It's not setting up a respectful conversation. And so the question is, why would he approach the Buddha this way? Well, number one, the commentary says he was probably family, so has a relationship with Buddha, and he was probably in a familial role that would easily give rise to a grudge. So one of the commentaries, the Mahavamsa, which is a text out of Sri Lanka, said that Dandapani was the brother of the Buddha's wife. So Yashodhara's, the brother of the Buddha's birth mother, Maya, and foster mother of Mahapajapati. And so in that case, he would be the brother of the Buddha's mom and the one who raised him. And his mom died 7 days after he was born. And he kind of left Mahapajapati as his stepmom without so much as a goodbye, according to what we've got handed down. And now later, Mahapajapati comes and becomes a eminent bhikkhuni. So, worked out in the end, but we don't know where this story fits in. So basically, his sisters have been dissed by the Buddha in one way or the other, and Dandapani doesn't like it. And then there's another commentary that comes out of the Sanskrit commentaries that says Dandapani could be the father of the Buddha's wife, Yashodhara, in which case, the Buddha left with his wife with a small baby, and also doesn't seem like, oh, you're a great guy, I want to approach you with respect. So there might be this behind it, some history. However, the way that the Buddha replies is this, back in the sutta now. Venerable friend, my doctrine is such that in this world, with its devas, maras, and gods, this population with its ascetics and brahmins, its gods and humans, one does not dispute with anyone. So his doctrine is one does not dispute with anyone. Excuse me. And it is such that perceptions do not underlie the one who lives detached from sensual pleasures, without indecision, stripped of worry, and rid of craving for rebirth in this or that state. So again, this is the combined comments here. So in the face of Dandapani's evidently hostile attitude, the Buddha still addresses his uncle, so that's the relationship, in some form or another with the respectful avuso, which I translate as venerable friend. Bhante Sujato is using sir to show that respectfulness. Do you have a bigger, just kind of a heart feeling of what it is? Yeah, it's a heart feeling of warmth. And he emphasizes the non-conflict in the line with the claim that I do not argue with the world. It is the world that argues with me. And this comes from the next sutta. I'm going to insert in the middle of our looking at the Honeyball. So this is a theme that the Buddha does teach, is that I don't argue with the world. It argues with me, but I don't argue with the world. So what he's just said to Dandapani, one does not dispute with anyone, is my doctrine. What if we moved through the world that way? That our doctrine was, and this is not, I don't know if you've done that, I've done this, or had it done to me, I've had it done to me. I'm not going to argue with you. Has a different flavor, doesn't it? I'm not going to argue with you. I don't know if you can see the arm crossing here in the screen, but that's not what the Buddha's doing. He's saying, venerable friend, my stance is that I don't argue with anyone. And then the comment goes on to say that the expression perceptions do not underlie sanya nanusenti is unique in this context, and it must pertain to the highly charged relation between the Buddha and Dandapani. And perception is that mode of knowing that interprets the present in terms of the past, and hence it might sometimes be translated as recognition. So Dandapani approaches the Buddha, recognizes him in this family context. And the Buddha, by asserting he is no longer bound by past perceptions, he's hinting to Dandapani how he might get out of this grudge. So it's kind of an enigmatic teaching that's really hinting at something very particular for this individual who has a grudge against the Buddha. So the sutta continues, that is my doctrine in this, that is what I assert. So I assert that my teaching is such that I quarrel with no one. The word quarrel or dispute that we see in the sutta in Pali is vigaya, and it means quarreling or contending with. It literally means grasping differently. So two people grasping something differently. And that grasping aspect is important as we look at this. And also that there is a difference. And the last sutta we'll look at will go into what are the permutations around that and what your response could be based on what kind of grasping is going on and who's doing the grasping. But let's take a segue to that sutta that was mentioned about not arguing with anyone in the world. And that's the Flower Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya 2294. And the summary here is that the Buddha doesn't dispute with the world disputes with him. Like a lotus, he was born in the swamp, samsara, but he rises above it. And so here is extract from the text. Mendicants, I do not argue with the world. It is the world that argues with me. When your speech is in line with the teaching, you do not argue with anyone in the world. So this is not saying that you don't have an alignment or even a view. It's a right view in alignment with the teachings. But it doesn't result in argumentation. There's no strife as you interact or share the teaching. And the word here is too many short syllables, hold on. Vivadati, there we go. And the vad in the middle of the word, that's the root, and it means speech. So, and the v would be a differing. So disagrees with disputes with, argues with, quarrels with, conflicts with. It's literally speaks apart. Again, that separation of speech. And that's often what an argument is. And we'll look at, well, can we have a disagreement and then come back into some sense of harmony with our third sutta. So the end of that sutta, Flowers, says, suppose that there were a blue water lily or a pink or a white lotus. Though it sprouted and grew in the water, it would rise up above the water and stand with no water clinging to it. In the same way, though I was born and grew up in the world, I live having mastered the world, unsullied by the world. I was going to go into the word unsullied, but I think you get the gist of that. This is the lily rising up. And if you've ever seen a lotus or a lily, if a drop of water falls on it, just slides off. So there's nothing to stick. I've had teachers use other analogies that some made sense to me, some not, but that lotus, it's not that there's not contact, it's that it doesn't stick. Okay, so we'll go back to the Honeyball Sutta. I'll repeat this one. Venerable friend, my doctrine is such that in this world with its devas, maras, and gods, this population with its ascetics and brahmins, its gods and humans, one does not dispute with anyone. And it is such that perceptions do not underlie the one who lives detached from sensual pleasures, without indecision, stripped of worry, and rid of craving for rebirth in this or that state. So the comment is that this is all said in a non-conflictual way. The Buddha is not calling out Dandapani's hostility directly, and he responds with a kind of a more passive form of speech. Buddha isn't passive, but he's responding in a form that's not provocative. And this is what the sutta says occurred next. When the Buddha had spoken, Dandapani shook his head, wagged his tongue, raised his eyebrows until his brow puckered in 3 furrows, and departed, leaning on his staff. Shook his head, waggled his tongue, raised his eyebrows until his brow puckered in 3 furrows, and left leaning on his staff. So the comment here is that Dandapani, he's stopped in his tracks, and he has no reply that could move the argument forward. But unfortunately, as we'll see in a moment, when the Buddha relays this tale to the bhikkhus, he doesn't ask a follow-up question so that he could gain some clarity. He just kind of shakes off the opportunity and departs. So although the Buddha was able to diffuse this immediate situation, it's not that Dandapani is at this moment, gaining some wonderful Dhamma and furthering on the path. And there are other places in the suttas where this same kind of sequence of body actions is attributed to Mara when talking with the Buddha. Another person that doesn't really want to come into agreement with the Buddha. And so I just want to bring this up because this does happen in the world. People who are stuck in a position, and your words aren't going to necessarily move them from that position, but maybe you can disarm them. I do have an example. I was on alms round in Petaluma. Ayadamavara knows the route. And on that day, I was with some Vietnamese bhikkhunis. And part of the route goes by this Vietnamese restaurant, and has some Cambodian brothers who own this shop. And so they made an offering, and we were out on the sidewalk. And because it was special to have the Vietnamese bhikkhunis there who could chant the Anumodana, the celebration, in Vietnamese. I don't know Vietnamese, so I was just a happy observer because I could just see these brothers were so happy to be receiving this. And the brothers were kind of on one side of this wide sidewalk and the bhikkhunis were on the other. And so people could either pass behind the bhikkhunis, there was plenty of space, or right down the middle. And I'm closest to where a woman is coming along and they're chanting and I'm just rejoicing. And as she begins to pass in front of me, right between us, right in the middle of the chanting, she says, "As if you have nothing better to do." Yeah, which is kind of a conflictual, provocative statement, I think, if I pick up the tone and the words I'm trying to imitate. But my heart was so full of metta that all I heard was, "As if you have nothing better to do." And my heart was like, "You see me." There is nothing better that we could be doing right now other than rejoicing in the generosity of these brothers. And so my affect, the way that I met her, was very, very different than she was anticipating. And she continued walking past and paused at the corner that wasn't that far. And she literally did. She turned around, she shook her head. She didn't do any of the tongue waggling, but shook her head and like she's like, "What happened?" Shook it off and walked away. So, it was like she was maybe gearing up for a fight and there was no fighting to be had. So this is something that we can look at when we're in this possible space of altercation. Yeah. It was just such a lovely moment. All right, so the sutta continues. Then, in the late afternoon, the Buddha came out of retreat and went to the banyan tree monastery, sat down on the seat spread out, and told the mendicants what had happened. When he had spoken, one of the mendicants said to him, "But sir, asserting what doctrine does the Buddha not conflict with anyone in this world with its gods, maras, and divinities, this population with its ascetics and brahmins, its gods and humans?" I did insert this comment from Bhante Sujato that this passage is somewhat difficult to translate. And he really took a lot of care of looking at the parts of speech and what the pronouns were referring to as a general person or the Buddha. And he made it clear that the subject and the object are the Buddha in this and the next sentence. And so he's actually inserted the words the Buddha. What doctrine does the Buddha have? And then in the next sentence, how do the perceptions not underlie the Buddha? And it helps us to put this in context because we're really clear that how does this land when in this situation for an enlightened being? How does this response, what underlies the reaction of the enlightened being? So for me, I say I've still got a lot of work to do, but here is the bar. Here is what's possible. So I offer that as we're talking about what does the Buddha do when disagreement arises? And so it says, "And how is it that perception does not underlie the Buddha, the Brahmin who lives detached from sensual pleasures, without indecision, stripped of worry, and rid of craving for rebirth in this or that state?" Now that's something I aspire to, a state of being detached from sensual pleasures, without indecision, stripped of worry, and rid of craving. Mendicant judgments driven by proliferating perceptions beset a person. This is the Buddha's reply. Judgments driven by proliferating perceptions beset a person. The Pali for that is Yato dinanang bhikkhu purisang papanchasanya sankha samuda charanti. And the word sankha is judgment. And this is the way we appraise or assess ourselves, especially in relation to others. So this is our judgment. Papancha, That's a definite word to put in your vocabulary. Proliferation. And it's the compulsion of the mind to spread out an endless inner commentary that hides reality. Anyone find this happen on while meditating? Yeah. Yeah, I see some big-handed responses there. Samudha charanti, beset. And this conveys the sense that the person is overwhelmed or swamped, no longer the agent of their existence. And this is something that if there's some really nice, I think Ajahn Brahmali's got one too, but the one that I listened to most recently was Bhante Sujato. Wonderful, wonderful YouTube on this. And I'm sure you'll be able to find it. If you don't find it, you can write to the Vihara and I'll send it to you. Don't have it off the top of my head. And he really points out that this is kind of the point where our patterns are running the show. So we're past that point of like assessing, and we start to jump into proliferation, and then we're beset by it. Our proliferation is now doing us rather than we're doing the proliferation. And that takes a bit to break out of those cycles. It's very rare that you'll hear me say something was doing me, in my behaviors. I like to take responsibility and agency and find that spot where I can interject and say, oh, I take responsibility for this proliferation. But there do come points where our actions are unfolding and all we can do is have enough mindfulness to see what's going on, but we can't stop the train until we've gotten more skillful. And then the other word in here is parisa, and that's person. And person there is that conventional sense of self, that arising out of desire and identification. So maybe you can see, like, how do you not be a target for that's actually going to bounce back and you have a response? When that self isn't there to land on, then there's no bounce back that happens. All right. And it continues, if they don't find anything worth approving, welcoming, or getting attached to in the source from which these arise, just this is the end of the underlying tendencies to desire, repulsion, views, doubt, conceit, the desire to be reborn, and ignorance. This is the end of the taking up of the rod and the sword, the end of quarrels, arguments, and disputes, of accusations, divisive speech, and lies. So there's a lot of wonderfulness. Yeah, I see a big sigh. There's a lot of wonderfulness that comes out of this ending of the underlying tendencies. I think I'll skip this little bit. You can explore that when I make the text available. So here the comment is about the underlying tendencies. These are the anusaya. And the Buddha is implying that these are meant by the perceptions in the phrase, perceptions do not underlie the Brahman, or do not underlie the Buddha or one. These anusaya are the things that are driving us. They're the underlying impulses. And then the Buddha identifies the doctrine that leads to peace as the ending of these tendencies that create proliferation and judgment about this supposed person, this supposed self. And the sutta goes on, this is where these bad, unskillful qualities cease without anything left over. And the Buddha is indicating that this is arahantship. So we're kind of 2/3 of the way or so through this exploration, but I would like to open it up before we go to the next sutta about actually working in disputes and see how this is landing. If you have any questions or comments about the proliferation or the relationship or the quarreling or anything at all from that arises from the suttas we looked at already. Nicole.
I'm so glad.
Oops, hold on. My sound is down. Please start over.
Well, first, it's so good to be here and to see you. And I'm really glad that this sutta was the sutta today because I've heard Bhante Sujato talk about it as well on one of his Friday nights some years ago, and that the name Pani, Danda means staff. So this person is probably also like, carrying a staff, which is also a weapon, So like even more intimidating. And I've been reading this wonderful book. It's like 4 inches thick. It's called The Shape of Ancient Thought, but it is comparing the philosophies from India and Greece and showing the crossover and the influences. And so it is kind of like a history of philosophy and the influences that the shared history and then the crossover. And it mentioned something that um, made me think of this sutta because there was a group of ascetics who kind of practiced a black magic idea of karma, which is that they would go around carrying staffs and they would intentionally get in fights with people because the idea is that if they make somebody else act badly in response to them, then that person accrues the bad karma and takes away their own bad karma. So this is a total misunderstanding of karma, but it's a people in India and Greece both were known to do it. Like they would pick fights on purpose, thinking that they were clearing their own karma.
Sure. Well, we have that misconception nowadays too. And the way I see it manifesting nowadays is if I unload on you, I'll feel better. So it's like an instant reaction of, well, I got that off my chest. Sorry, I just dropped the load of bricks on you, but it's off my chest. I feel better. And there is a temporary lightening that happens when we spew out whatever it is we're spewing. So you will notice a body response of a moment of relief. The difficulty with that, where the comma really comes into play, is that what we're setting in motion is this short-term gratification, the relief of not having that ickiness pent up inside. We've just vomited it onto another. We're still going to be standing in the realm of the stench of that vomit, and we're creating a relational experience that's not healthy and wholesome. We're not putting safety out into the world. We're not treating ourselves as in our last week's sutta, we're not treating ourselves as beloved. We're actually using weapons against ourselves when we do this kind of behavior. So although we don't state it so clearly as, oh, this is to rectify my comma, that's not something you're going to hear, your boss or the administration or whatever use. It's still a very similar behavior we have today, which is why I think these suttas are still highly, highly relevant. Other comments, questions, concerns? Everyone's ready to go into the permutations of the ways that we can dispute and the characteristics we have while we do so. Yay. All right. Did you have any comment you wanted to add? Not at this point. Okay. So the last sutta we'll look at today is this what you think of me? And it's Majjhima Nikaya 103. And this probably occurred very near the end of the Buddha's life. And the reason that supposition is made is because in the first line you see, thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living in Kusinara, in the grove of offerings. And that location isn't like a repeat place that the Buddha has spoken from in many suttas. It's where he was near the end of his life. And so this sutta is likely given with the knowledge that he's soon to be passing away. And it is, I'm leaving the word bhikkhus and mendicants in the text. Sometimes I pull that out because of the generality. I'm leaving it in this time because he is speaking to an intentional community. And I'm using the word bhikkhus, not monastics, just because I want it to be really clear that he's talking about a group who are living together. It does apply more broadly, but just to keep the context clear for this sutta. And so he wants to pass on, even if you're living in harmony, things are going to come up. And this is how it would be appropriate to deal with them. That's kind of the summary of the sutta. Okay, so the Blessed One said this: "What do you think about me, bhikkhus? That the recluse Gotama teaches the Dhamma for the sake of robes? Or that the recluse Gotama teaches the Dhamma for the sake of alms food? Or that the recluse Gotama teaches the Dhamma for the sake of resting place? Or that the recluse Gotama teaches the Dhamma for the sake of some better state of being, so some next life, go to heaven, or whatever the aspiration is." So basically he's saying, do you think that I teach this because I want to receive worldly benefits or a better a rebirth? And they reply, "We do not think thus about the Blessed One. The recluse Gotama teaches the Dhamma for the sake of robes, or for alms food, or for the sake of a resting place, or for the sake of some better state of being." And the Buddha replies, "So, bhikkhus, you do not think thus about me. Then what do you think about me?" "Venerable Sir, we think thus about the Blessed One. The Blessed One is compassionate and seeks our welfare. He teaches the Dhamma out of compassion." I love this someone who sometimes comes to these has done a lot of study about the word compassion and where it appears in the suttas. And it is a wonderful exploration to do. And you see it repeatedly that the Buddha teaches out of compassion. And the comment here is that the Buddha is assessing the listeners to see if they're likely in a state that will relate to him with openness and be receptive to his teaching. Now, this is definitely in contrast to the last sutta, where Dandapani was not open. He was, closed, leaning on his staff, and he wasn't receptive. He, left wagging his tongue. The common term would be maybe giving the Buddha the raspberry. I can't even make myself do it. That would be the equivalent of wagging one's tongue in today's world. I tried to practice it earlier. I was doing it, but I can't get myself done. Yeah. Anyway, so he's assessed that the bhikkhus here are not in that tight, constricted state. They are interested and open to what the Buddha is going to offer. "So, bhikkhus, you think thus about me. The Blessed One is compassionate and seeks our welfare. He teaches the Dhamma out of compassion." Notice this is reflexive listening that the Buddha is providing here. "So, bhikkhus, these things that I have taught you after directly knowing them, that is, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right kinds of striving, the 4 bases for spiritual power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 enlightenment factors, the Noble Eightfold Path." I think we've just covered all the wings of awakening here. I'd have to add the numbers up. I don't have the list memorized in this way, but I think that's what this is. "In these things, you should all train in concord with mutual appreciation and without disputing." So he's pinpointing, this is the stuff that really, when you start saying, what did the Buddha teach? This is the part that matters. And we'll get into how a lot of the rest, there's teachings in the Vinaya for the monastics of, if you're having an argument with another monastic, and it's about these things, figure it out, make sure you know the Dhamma. But if you're disputing about how to hold the Vinaya rule, that's trivial, is what the Buddha says. Make your alignment with things like the Four Noble Truths. That's where the harmony needs to be. And he says, well, you are training in concord with mutual appreciation without disputing. Two bhikkhus might make different assertions about the higher Dhamma. Could say two bhikkhunis too. Two anyone's might make a different assertion about the higher Dhamma. And the higher Dhamma is what he's talking about above, this list of the factors, the wings to awakening. So he's saying disagreements happen even when you're in concord, mutual appreciation. There are misunderstandings, or that somebody hasn't learned the teaching, and they need some help, some clarification. So the sutta continues. Now, if you should think thus, these venerable ones differ about both the meaning and the phrasing. So you're a third party looking on. Then whichever bhikkhu you think is the more reasonable should be approached and addressed thus. So start with the easy one. The venerable ones differ about both the meaning and the phrasing. The venerable ones should know that it is for this reason that there is dispute. I'm going to mute someone here. There we go. Welcome to unmute if you have a question or comment. The venerable ones should know that it is for this reason that there is difference about the meaning and difference about the phrasing. Let them not fall into a dispute. Then, whichever bhikkhu you think is the most reasonable of those who side together on the opposite part, sounds like legalese here, should be approached and addressed thus. The venerable ones differ about the meaning and the phrasing. The venerable one should know that it is for this reason that there is a difference about the meaning and a difference about the phrasing. Let them not fall into a dispute. So what has been wrongly grasped should be borne in mind as wrongly grasped. Bearing in mind what has been wrongly grasped is wrongly grasped. What is Dhamma and what is discipline should be expounded. So I took that legalese paragraph and I put it into a step-by-step way to approach a dispute. As the third person, you look on and you assess, where does the disagreement lie? Is there some sort of underlying Dhamma that's people aren't understanding in the same way, and also forward leading? We'll see the forward leading part later. Or are they disputing in just how it was said? I have been that third party person and said to the two parties, I feel like you're saying exactly the same thing. And they just can't hear each other. They're actually in total agreement, but so in one of the permutations, they agree, but they're being disagreeable. And it sometimes takes a third party to say, I think you're saying the same thing. So-and-so, I heard you say this, is that right? So-and-so, do you hear that, how that is the same as what I heard you say, which is this? Okay, this is why I perceive you're saying the same thing. And boom, sometimes that's enough. And then you can go to the part of really, why is there heartache here? And they realize the disagreement, that they're not actually disagreeing, they're just being disagreeable. Ever encountered this? Yeah. Okay, so this, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But the method, first get clear on where is the disagreement. And then next assess who is most receptive to the intervention. And third, explain to them why the disagreement occurred. How did you see it emerge? And get them to focus on reestablishing harmony. Now, this is not by a bypassing or anything. That's why we looked at what are the causes of the disagreement, what is content of the disagreement. So the reestablishing of harmony. And then next you go to the other side. So you're not just hashing it out. One of my teachers explained that this is called shuttle diplomacy. So in shuttle diplomacy, you work with one side and then you shuttle to the other side, you work with them. And you may do this multiple times before you bring the parties together. So you repeat this process with the second one, and then you may bring the parties together and expound the Dhamma so that there is mutual understanding. And this is assuming that this third party has enough knowledge and wisdom to actually be able to expound on the teachings. I know sometimes I feel like I'm closer to that position and sometimes I'm far away from it. So that's an assessment I think that needs to be made as well. Okay, so I put ... because it goes through a lot of the permutations, and I want to get to the other part of the sutta as well. Here's one of the other permutations. Now, if you think thus, these venerable ones agree about the meaning but differ about the phrasing, then you would identify you differ in this way, but you're the same in this way. So essentially it comes down to, if you differ about the meaning, then your response is to establish what is Dhamma. If they differ about the phrasing, remind them that this part is to reveal. And that I'm not saying there's not a lot of heart work that needs to be done around this, but when we get to the core of the content, focus on the Dhamma and then work with the harmony that needs to be established. Okay. Any questions before we go to the next set? Okay. It's kind of clear that, yeah, don't, I have been in those arguments quibbling about something that just doesn't matter. And it's not forward leading for the relationship. It's not forward leading for, there are a lot of things that it's like, just let it go. Just let it go. Okay, so we'll continue with the sutta. While you are training in concord with mutual appreciation without disputing, some bhikkhu might commit an offense or a transgression. Now, bhikkhus, you should not hurry to reprove him. Rather, the person should be examined thus. So I've highlighted that. You should not hurry to reprove, rather examine. So first, don't just jump in. You shouldn't speak like that. That's wrong. Really examine the situation and how you are, how they are, and what result you think might emerge by your intervention. So it should be examined thus. I shall not be troubled, and the other person will not be hurt, for the other person is not given to anger and resentment. He is not firmly attached to his view, and he relinquishes easily. And I can make that person emerge from the unwholesome and establish him in the wholesome. If such occurs to you, bhikkhus, it is proper to speak. And I'll do one of the other permutations and then we'll unpack it. Then it may occur to you, bhikkhus, the different situation. Now, it might occur, I shall not be troubled, but the other person will be hurt. For the other person is given to anger and resentment. However, he's not firmly attached to his view and he relinquishes easily. And I can make that person emerge from the unwholesome and establish him in the wholesome. It is a mere trifle that the other person will be hurt, but it is a much greater thing that I can make that person emerge from unwholesome and establish him in the wholesome. If such occurs to you, bhikkhus, it is proper to speak. And then the ... or, you can work out the other permutations that are possible. So I'm going to repeat that on the screen with some highlighting. And the highlights are in the phrasing, I shall not be troubled. This is something I'm evaluating. If I take on resolving this conflict or addressing, in this case, addressing this bhikkhu or bhikkhuni or friend who's committed some sort of fault, it's not going to be troubling to me to talk to them. The opposite is the other permission. I'm going to be troubled. So that'll come up. I did a chart for us. On the other side, I examine, will this person be hurt? And the answer is, well, that person is not given to anger and resentment, so they're probably not. Or they are, so they're going to be hurt. And so then I further evaluate, are they firmly attached to their views, or do they relinquish them easily? And then I also look at, can I make that person emerge from the unwholesome and establish them in the wholesome? Do I feel I have the skill to help direct them towards the wholesome? So here is my chart spreadsheet. Yay! First line of it is, I shall be troubled. So we look at that, no or yes. Next line is, the other person will be hurt and is given to anger and resentment. No or yes. And then the other person is firmly attached to views and relinquishes with difficulty. No or yes. And I can make the other person emerge from the unwholesome and establish wholesome. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 criterias I'm looking at. And in the chart, I color coded the, what is the most easeful? I shall be troubled? No. Well, no is more easeful than yes. Yes. The other person will be hurt. Well, no, that's more easeful than yes. The other person's firmly attached to their views, relinquishes with difficulty. Well, no, that's easier to work with than yes. And then I can make the other person emerge from the wholesome and establish the wholesome. That's more about the result. And if the result is yes, we'd say that's the most positive. No, not so much. And so then I added a row that just takes those 4 paragraphs or 5 paragraphs from the sutta. So in the case, we've got different permutations in the first 3. In the case, I can make the other person emerge from unwholesome and establish wholesome. If the answer is yes, regardless of how difficult the answers to the other questions are, one should speak. And go back to, the Buddha teaches out of compassion. So this is our being compassionate to our companions. Now, we may need a lot of practice and skill to be able to do that in a wholesome way, but at the right time, following the rules of right speech, yes, we should point out what's going on for that other person and help bring them. In that one permutation that is given in the sutta of it's difficult, and no, I can't establish. It says one should not underrate equanimity toward such a person. And I think that if we fleshed out all the possible permutations, really the only row we need to pay attention to is, can I help? Can I actually make a difference that is going to help this person along in the Dhamma? So anytime you see a no there, then practice equanimity. And that at least is giving that person the space to, in the future, maybe be able to approach a change that's wholesome. Okay, we are getting near the end. I'm going to continue because it's not enough to go into another week. The biggest thing is that it's a trifle if the other person is hurt or if I am hurt in the process, but it is a much greater thing that I can make that person emerge from the unwholesome and establish them in the wholesome. Okay, so one more section here. Well, you are training in concord with mutual appreciation without disputing. There might arise mutual verbal friction, insolence in views, mental annoyance, bitterness, and dejection. So even though we're flowing along beautifully, there might be a, you said what to me? Happens even in the best of communities. Then whichever bhikkhu you think is most reasonable, so we go through that same kind of thing, should be approached. Well, we were training in concord, friend, with mutual appreciation, without disputing. There did arise this mutual verbal friction, insolence in views, mental annoyance, bitterness, and dejection. If the Buddha knew, would he censure that? So it's helping to like, if especially if I'm not an enlightened being, what would the Buddha think about this situation? It's a good thing to bring into the conversation. And they may answer rightly that while we were training, if the Buddha knew, he would censure that. And then the other question is, friend, without abandoning this thing, this verbal friction, this annoyance, this bitterness, can one realize nibbana? And answering rightly, the bhikkhu would answer thus, friend, without abandoning that thing, one cannot realize nibbana. Then you do the same with, if there's a conflict, you do the same with the other side as well. So the approach is these two questions. If the Buddha knew what was going on, would he censure it? And without abandoning this, can one realize nibbana? These are wonderful things you can bring into your own evaluation. And then I'll just read the end of the sutta here. If others should ask the bhikkhu thus, was it the venerable one who made those bhikkhus emerge from the unwholesome and established them in the wholesome? So this is after the fact. It's like, whoa, I worked it out. The song is in harmony. It's all on me. Good job. No. Answering rightly, the bhikkhu would answer thus. Here, friend, I went to the Blessed One. The Blessed One taught me the Dhamma. Having heard the Dhamma, I spoke to those bhikkhus. The bhikkhus heard the Dhamma, and they emerged from the unwholesome and became established in the wholesome. Answering thus, the bhikkhu neither exalts himself nor disparages others. He answers in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from his assertion. It's a mouthful, but essentially it's saying, no, he's saying this is the natural unfolding of listening to the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, sharing the Dhamma. That is how these people came established in what was wholesome. And it's not putting anyone down in the process, seeing that conditions were like this, their altercation arose, conditions were like that, the Dhamma was brought in, and naturally it came to be that the wholesome qualities were established and harmony was restored. That is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So, turning the screen share off. Comments, questions. Is this topic relevant? Big head nods. Yes. Yeah, this topic is relevant. Anything that anyone would like to share? Well, we still have the recording on. Otherwise, and after that, we will do the veneration to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha and go to the after party where you could share more personally if you wish. So the mic is open. Pretty clear? Curiosities, questions, elucidations from your life that you want on recording? All right, we're going to go to praise to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and then we'll turn the recording off so that the rest is not for posterity on YouTube. This is part of the sharing at the right time. Arahang Samha Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Sakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangha Sanghang Namami. So thank you for joining and hope that you have a good week of exploration with this. And I'm going to turn the recording off now.